I'm Joyce Kinmont, founder of the LDS Home Educators Association. We support parents who are homeschooling their children. Our organization has no official connection with the LDS Church, but we are very connected by membership and our heartstrings. My husband and I homeschooled our 8 children, and now as grandparents, we are reaping the rewards of those wonderful years. And you are, I assume, a parent who's thought about homeschooling your children, or a grandparent wanting to help your own grandchildren, or just someone who wants to do something to help a child you may not even know get a better education. And maybe you're a member of the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons, and you wonder if homeschooling is against church policy. Or you wonder if our LDS children ought to stay in public schools to be an influence for good. Or you wonder if you're capable of properly educating your children, and will they be able to get into college, and where will you get curriculum, and what about socialization? We'll examine all these questions in this series of videos. First, we'll look at the church position. Is homeschooling an acceptable alternative to the public school system? Are the prophets and the heavens pleased when parents homeschool their children? There are many local church leaders and bishops and stake presidents who do homeschool. There are homeschoolers among the posterity of our prophets. But as for the official position, if you were to call the Church Office of Public Affairs, and I just did that, you will be told that the current official church policy is no position. And why no position? Could it be that education is vital, but the method of education is a parental choice and responsibility? Let me pause here to tell you our story. My husband and I joined the church as young marrieds in California back in 1964, a long time ago. When it was time to enroll our oldest child in first grade, we moved here to Utah, and we thought we were in Zion. But our very smart little girl struggled with look-say reading, and there were some other problems, and we realized that Utah wasn't Zion quite yet. We moved our daughter to American Heritage, a private school started by a group of BYU professors. Then we were on the road to Zion. Sister Shirley Anderson, the wife of Elder H. Verlin Anderson, who would later become a 70, taught our daughter to read using phonics. I felt so blessed. And of course, it never occurred to me that I could learn to do that myself. The school used a Christian curriculum, and the Book of Mormon was also taught. Never occurred to me that I could do those things myself either. By the time our 3rd child was ready for school, we couldn't afford that much tuition, and I was really tired of having my children gone for such long hours. Then we learned that we could legally homeschool. This was in 1975, and just a very few Utah families were homeschooling. So it was a little scary, and there were some battles to be fought, but it was so sweet and so peaceful just to be in our own home together. We read books, we did hands-on math, we strung beads on wires for 10 bars and squares for 100 bead bars, and we put a timeline around the wall and marked all the historical events as we read about them, and we read the Book of Mormon together. We had family home morning every day. Sometimes we just talked and enjoyed being together. In the afternoons, we all had time for our own special projects. One of my projects was to learn the sounds of the 26 letters and their idiosyncrasies. It wasn't really that hard, and what joy it was to teach the rest of my children to read myself. We took the road less traveled, and it has made all the difference. A couple of years into our homeschooling experience, I heard that a legislative committee was meeting in the Capitol in Salt Lake City, and a bill was being introduced to require state control of private schooling, which I knew would include homeschooling. So I went to the meeting to testify. I think this was my first legislative experience. The bill was read, and then the meeting was opened for public comment, and I hopped right up and took my turn. The bill was killed that day, but it was not my short comments that did the job. It was the respect those Utah legislators had for the principles of freedom and agency and the proper role of government. And besides, I had naively expected to be alone that day, and I probably was the only homeschooler. But when I sat back down, I saw a long line of nicely dressed men and women waiting their turn to testify. These great people were private school administrators and their lawyers. Most were from the schools of other churches, and some of those schools had been operating since the early days of Utah. American Heritage was there as a private school with an LDS curriculum. I felt protected by the wisdom of these people. And I felt really protected when I found that some of these lawyers were representing BYU. BYU had sent their lawyers. Well, BYU is the largest private school, the largest private university in the nation. I learned that the church certainly does support private education. I learned that as Latter-day Saints and as citizens in any free country, we should all value and protect private education of all kinds. Which brings us back to homeschooling. One day, Reed Benson, a son of then Apostle Ezra Taft Benson, summoned me to his home. I had never met him, but he wanted to question me about our family school. Brother Benson was working on his doctorate at BYU, and he and his wife May had embarked on a year-long experiment in homeschooling their large family. Of course, it worked so well they kept right on going, but this experiment was the foundation of his research project, and when his dissertation was published in 1981, it was the first dissertation in the nation on homeschooling, published out of BYU. Certainly Ezra Taft Benson would not have encouraged his son to write this dissertation, and BYU would not have allowed it if the church had been opposed to homeschooling. Another BYU professor, Dr. Larry Arnoldson, often taught about homeschool in his education classes, and for the last few years before his retirement, he taught a whole class just on homeschooling itself. As far as he knew, this was also a first in the nation. I just visited the blog of a lady who had taken one of Dr. Arnoldson's earlier classes and then homeschooled her 5 daughters, who now homeschooled their children. And this grandma has helped by teaching 11 of her grandchildren to read. In the early days of homeschooling, parents occasionally were accused of apostasy, but a call to church headquarters would always get that straightened out. So while the official position is no position, the parental right will be defended within the church. And besides, the Utah Home Education Association was founded by the daughter of President Benson's personal secretary. I've watched the homeschool movement for 35 years, and I've seen it bring great joy to families. It gives families more time together to do the things that families need to do, and it enables them to make their own educational decisions. And it frees the children from a lot of stress and bullying, and helps them become self-reliant and self-directed. It also helps them develop their individual talents in many areas, not just those things that can be done at a desk. And homeschooling fits very well with our doctrine. It helps all of us become more creative, and creativity is what we have all come here to learn about. It also helps us learn in the ways the church is now teaching us, by questioning and by acting rather than being acted upon, and by listening and being taught by the Holy Ghost. Learning in these ways will take us on the path that matches the education that's being developed at BYU, and especially at BYU, Idaho, so we'll be on the right track. So as we look around in our world and see everything falling apart, we have to remember that in the midst of all this, a Zion society is being built. And the road between where we are now and that Zion society is an upward path. Many things are changing, including the way we educate our children. Education in a Zion society will not look like our present system.